Hello, today we're going to talk about caffeine, Group A dietary supplement, um, a, a chemical that performs probably as claimed for most people, but we're going to look at it in more detail and understand whether it's the right supplement for you. Caffeine is known to enhance endurance, improve alertness, reduce fatigue in most sports, so it's definitely a high consideration, but it may not be for you. Let's take a look at how does caffeine work? Caffeine has a number of mechanisms of action. One way is that caffeine blocks adenosine binding to the adenosine receptor, thereby reducing fatigue in the brain. Another way that caffeine functions is by signaling to the adrenal gland to release adrenaline, or directly signaling to fat cells, the adipocytes, to improve fatty acid oxidation. This is glycogen sparing and allows improved endurance capacity. Another way is that caffeine functions is directly on muscle cells. Caffeine can directly alter calcium release, improve calcium release, and increase force production by muscle cells. Very important mechanisms. All three of these mechanisms can improve different sports and can improve your sport performance, but caffeine is not for everybody. There are a number of genetic factors that alter your response to caffeine. There are people that contain a genetic mutation called CYP1A2. This is around 50% of all people, makes us, I'm one of them, makes us a slow metabolizer of caffeine, which means that caffeine can adversely affect us, and particularly adversely affect our sleep cycles. So we want to be cautious to make sure caffeine is used only in the morning and not in the afternoon or evening. Otherwise, it can adversely affect sleep, and sleep is an essential part of training. Another mutation is this ADORA2A mutation. People with this mutation, it's a rare mutation, are particularly sensitive. Their nervous system is particularly sensitive to the effects of caffeine. It can make you jittery, it can make you feel unwell. Caffeine is definitely not for people with this mutation. You need to test as an experiment of one whether caffeine is going to improve your performance and whether you need to restrict caffeine intakes to the morning time or not. Let's take a look at the guidelines here. Here are the mutations, for caffeine. This is you can get a greater ergogenic effect with a smaller dose if you're a slower metabolizer. And there can be greater ergogenic effects, but also increased anxiety with some of these mutations here in the ADORA2. So this may not be ideal if anxiety is preventing you from performance. Okay, so let's say you like caffeine already, and you're a high caffeine consumer. Does taking additional caffeine for your sporting event improve your performance? And the answer is yes. Taking additional caffeine can improve performance, even in habitual coffee users. So you don't need to abstain from caffeine. You can be a moderate caffeine user, a high caffeine user, or even a low caffeine user. And taking caffeine is definitely going to improve your performance. This is a time trial race. So this would be control, and you're going faster with caffeine. Control, you're going faster with caffeine. Control or placebo, and you're going faster with caffeine. In all three cases, you can improve your performance with caffeine use on game day or on a race day, even if you like to have a cup of coffee every single day and you're a high caffeine consumer. When should you take caffeine, or does caffeine work late on if you're flagging? The answer is yes, caffeine can work. You should take it before the start, about 30 minutes before the start. You should know that caffeine has a half-life of around 3 to 5 hours. So dosing at a maximum of every 1.5 hours will keep you topped up. You should know that the maximum dose of caffeine to consider for an entire day is 400 milligrams of caffeine. But But you can spread that 400 milligrams of caffeine throughout your sporting event. My recommendation would be to dose with 100 to 200 milligrams of caffeine before the start of your event, and then 200 milligrams about 1.5 hours into your sporting event. Be cautious not to overdose. How about caffeine and dehydration? Moderate consumption of coffee, because it contains a lot of liquid, is not dehydrating. In fact, it's slightly hydrating, but it's clearly not as good at hydrating as water would be. And how much caffeine do you find in coffee? Unfortunately, we don't know. Every time you get a cup of coffee at Starbucks, it can vary from 250 through 500 milligrams of caffeine. So this would be overdosing, and this would be about 2/3 of a dose. So really, we don't know, and that makes using coffee, particularly on race day or on game day, a difficult choice. You're actually better to buy no-dose or some other form of caffeine from the chemists, from the pharmacy, and really understand your dose on game day or race day, and be very cautious again not to overdose, not to pass by 400 milligrams of caffeine in a day. So these are some alertness aids. They have caffeine in them. Each one contains about 200 milligrams. Again, I would recommend that you take 200 milligram dose of caffeine 30 minutes prior to your event, and then 200 milligrams about 1.5 to 3 hours into your event. And that will be it. That will maximize your 400 milligrams per day of caffeine. You might want to spread your caffeine out a little bit further and start with a lower dose, 100 milligrams, and then take 100 milligrams every 1.5 hours if you need to spread your caffeine intakes over a longer period of time. These caffeine intakes should improve endurance and performance. They should enhance sprint performance, increase fat metabolism, prevent neuromuscular fatigue. Again, do not exceed 400 milligrams per day, and do test this in training before you use it in a competition or on a game day to make sure that you don't have that adverse reaction to caffeine that some people with the Dora mutations may have.